Revenge works best when you wait for the perfect moment. Jake Miller parked his black car at the edge of town, looking at the new hillside plaza through his sunglasses. Another building owned by Wilson Construction, but not for much longer. 15 years. 15 years since he'd last been in this town, since he walked away from his old life as Robert James, a struggling carpenter who had passion but not much money. Now he was back as Jake Miller, a rich businessman who owned properties all along the East Coast. Not many people connected Jake Miller with Robert James. He didn't change his name to hide. He did it to separate his painful past from his successful present. He watched workers take down the Wilson Construction sign. In a few days, the change would be complete, but the owner still had no idea who had been buying all his properties. "Sir, your daughter is on line 1, his assistant said through the car speaker. Jake gripped the steering wheel tighter. Put her through. Lisa. His only child, now 26, a talented photographer starting to get noticed for her work. Their relationship fell apart after the divorce when she was 11, damaged by distance and the lies told by his ex-wife, Sarah. Dad? Lisa's voice had the slight hesitation it always did when they talked. Lizzie, he said, using her childhood nickname, then immediately regretted it. How are you? I'm getting engaged to Ben. She spoke quickly, like she was afraid to lose her nerve. The party is this Saturday at Mom and David's house. Jake kept his voice calm, though his mind was already working. Congratulations. He's a lucky man. That's why I'm calling. Her voice got quieter. David says you're not welcome. Mom agrees. I tried to change their minds, but... She trailed off. Jake closed his eyes, controlling the anger building inside him. I understand. It's your celebration, Lisa. I wouldn't want to make it difficult. After ending the call, Jake immediately called his investigator. Maggie, what do we know about Ben Taylor, son of Michael Taylor? Talented architect, specializes in green building design. Works at Summit Designs. Maggie's answer came quickly. Top of his class at college. Used to hack computers before going straight. Summit hired him specifically for their Green City project. Jake smiled slightly. Summit Designs, the cutting-edge architecture firm he had bought through shell companies 3 months ago. Not even the partners knew about the ownership change yet. And Ben reports directly to Kevin Walsh, right? Yes. Walsh says he's their best designer in years. Kevin, who knew Jake only as Miller, never as James, had become his most trusted employee over the last 8 years. David Wilson still doesn't know I'm behind the buyouts? No. He's in debt up to his neck trying to look rich. The engagement party alone is costing him over $100,000 he doesn't have. Jake nodded. Find everything on Michael Taylor's history with David Wilson. There's some connection we're missing. 2 days later, Maggie brought a thick file to his downtown apartment. She looked excited. You've got amazing instincts, she said, putting the file on his desk. 20 years ago, Michael and David were business partners. David forced Michael out of the company right before they got the government contract that made their first $1 million. Took full credit for Michael's security system design. Jake's eyes narrowed. The Taylors have no idea their son is marrying into the family of the man who ruined Michael's career. Correct. And there's more. Maggie showed him some printed emails. Sarah knows everything. She and David have even joked about how Michael would have a heart attack if he found out about the connection. Another piece fell into place in the plan he'd been working on for 15 years. And the engagement party? Maggie placed an invitation on his desk. Security will be tight but not impossible to get past. The night before the engagement party, Jake sat alone in his hotel room, looking through old photos. There was Lisa at 5, sitting on his shoulders at the beach, both of them laughing. Before everything fell apart. Before he came home early from a business trip to find David Wilson in his bedroom with Sarah. Jake had left with dignity then, not wanting to upset his daughter with a big fight. He'd given up almost everything in the divorce, the house he'd fixed up himself, their savings, asking only for regular visits with Lisa. But Sarah and David had poisoned his daughter against him, making up stories about how he abandoned them and didn't care until Lisa believed it was true. He put the photos away and thought about what would happen tomorrow. 15 years of patient waiting was about to pay off. The Wilson house was lit up like a Christmas tree, expensive cars lined up in the driveway. Jake straightened his tie before giving his car to the valet. The invitation, which Maggie had gotten for him, got him inside without any problems. The party was over the top, crystal decorations, champagne flowing, fancy flower arrangements everywhere. Jake could see it was the desperate show of a man pretending to be rich while actually being broke. A man whose company Jake could destroy at any moment. He spotted Lisa right away. She looked happy in a green dress, smiling as she introduced Ben to guests. Her fiancé seemed smart and honest, everything a father would want for his daughter. Jake felt a moment of doubt about how his plan would hurt them. He had only taken a few steps into the room when David spotted him, his face turning angry with recognition. "What the hell are you doing here?" David hissed, grabbing Jake's arm. Jake just smiled calmly. "Attending my daughter's engagement party. You weren't invited. You're nothing to her anymore." David's voice was just loud enough for nearby people to hear. "She doesn't want you here." People started to look over at them. Jake saw Lisa watching from across the room, her face showing both shock and confusion. "I think that should be my daughter's decision," Jake replied, staying calm but speaking clearly. David's face twisted with mean satisfaction. He was enjoying this, embarrassing Jake in public, showing his power, thinking he'd won. "Security," he called out. 2 men in suits appeared quickly. David leaned closer, smelling of whiskey. "She's ours now. You're nothing but a failed carpenter she's embarrassed to know. Get out before we throw you out." Jake saw Lisa start to step forward, but Sarah stopped her, whispering something that made Lisa stand up straight and look away from him. 15 years of lies all came to a head in that moment. With quiet dignity, Jake raised his hands. "No need for a scene. I'm leaving." He turned to go, then paused, making eye contact with Lisa across the crowded room. The confusion and doubt in her eyes told him what he had suspected. She was finally old enough to see that the story she'd been told might not be the whole truth. At the door, Jake made one call. "Go ahead." He went back to his car and watched the house from a distance. 45 minutes later, his phone buzzed with Maggie's text. "Packages delivered." Inside the party, Ben Taylor had just opened an envelope delivered by courier. His face went pale as he read it, then looked up at David with disgust and anger. "Is this true?" he demanded, his voice rising above the music. "Did you cheat my father? Steal his ideas and claim them as your own?" David's confident look faltered. "That's old news. Your father and I had a professional disagreement about who should get credit." "A disagreement?" Ben threw documents across the marble floor. "You forged his signature on patent applications. You erased him from the company he helped create." Michael Taylor stepped out from the shocked guests, holding his own envelope. "David, explain this." His hand shook as he held up some technical drawings. "These are my original designs for the Eagle project with my signature deliberately crossed out." The party erupted into chaos. Ben turned to Lisa, his face showing both betrayal and disbelief. "Did you plan this? Is this why you didn't want me to meet your family until after we were engaged?" "No, Ben, I didn't know anything about this." "There's more," Ben said, his voice breaking. "Your stepfather is broke. These documents show he's been stealing client money for years, and your mother helped him do it." He took the engagement ring from his pocket and placed it on a nearby table. "You never told me who your father really was, or maybe you never knew yourself." As Ben left, followed by his visibly upset family, Lisa turned to confront her mother and David, tears running down her face. "What have you done? What has Ben talking about?" David's face had gone from red to white. "These are lies. Made-up stories. My father? What does he have to do with any of this?" Sarah grabbed her daughter's arm hard. "Nothing. He has nothing to do with anything because he has nothing." Lisa pulled away. "Stop it. Stop lying to me." She picked up one of the scattered papers, her eyes going wide as she read it. "This says my father's company owns the building where Ben works." "That's impossible. Dad was barely making it in Portland after you drove him away." "What?" David snatched the paper from her hands, his face showing sudden understanding. "Miller Investments. Jake." "Miller." His voice dropped to a horrified whisper. "No, it can't be." From his car, Jake watched guests streaming out of the house, some looking shocked, others clearly enjoying the drama of seeing the town's power couple fall apart. Maggie called. "The SEC agents just arrived at Wilson Construction with warrants. The prosecutor has everything they need for multiple charges." Jake nodded, satisfaction flowing through him. "And Lisa? She's asking questions. Lots of them." "Good," Jake said. "It's time she learned the truth for herself." 3 days after the disastrous engagement party, Jake sat at a corner table in the best restaurant in town. The door opened and Lisa came in. She looked around until she saw him. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. When she sat across from him, she didn't look angry, just like she needed answers. "You're Jake Miller," she stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded slightly. "I changed my name legally after the divorce. It was easier to build something new than to try to fix what had been destroyed here." "Why did you keep it secret all these years?" "I thought you were struggling to get by in Portland, barely making it with your small woodworking shop. Those support checks." Her voice faltered. "I thought that was all you could afford to send. Would you have believed me if I'd told you about my success? Or would you have thought I was trying to buy your love?" Jake kept his voice gentle but direct. "Sarah and David had convinced you I was a failure who abandoned you when things got tough." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "They told me you left us, that you couldn't handle being a parent while trying to work. I left because I found David in our home, in our bedroom with your mother. Their affair had been going on for years before I found out." Jake slid a tablet across the table. "The complete truth has always been there, waiting until you were ready to see it." Lisa turned on the tablet with shaking hands. Bank records showing years of support payments, far more than required child support. Private investigator reports showing how Sarah had repeatedly violated their custody agreement, denying his court-ordered visits. Emails between David and Sarah specifically discussing how to turn Lisa against her father. "Why didn't you fight harder for me?" she whispered, barely audible. "Because fighting would have made you collateral damage in an ugly battle. I chose to wait, to build something that could eventually show the truth better than desperate claims or legal fights ever could." What is the truth? That everything David built was based on lies. His success came from stealing ideas, defrauding investors, and systematic deception. Now it's all falling apart under its own corrupt weight. Lisa studied him intently. The SEC investigation, the federal prosecutor, the evidence against David and Mom, that was all you're doing? Jake nodded once. Justice delayed, but finally delivered. "And Ben? Did you deliberately ruin my engagement?" I revealed the truth. "Ben deserved to know about the family he was joining, and you deserve the chance to build a life free from their lies." Jake leaned forward slightly. "I never stopped being your father, Lisa. Not for a single day." She was quiet for several long moments. "David and Mom were arrested yesterday. They're saying they'll likely go to prison. That everything will be taken away." "Yes. Where does that leave me?" Her voice cracked, showing the vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. Jake reached his hand across the table, close but not touching hers. "With choices. With me, if you want." 1 week later, Jake stood in his New York office looking at the city skyline, watching news coverage of David Wilson's court appearance. Sarah stood beside him in the courthouse footage, her once perfect appearance now plain and defeated. Both faced long sentences, David for fraud and embezzlement, Sarah as a knowing accomplice. The office door opened as Kevin came in with some contract papers. "The Taylor agreement is finalized." Michael was very grateful for the opportunity. He paused briefly. "Ben asked about you, about Jake Miller. What did you tell him?" "That you're fair but not someone who easily forgives betrayal." Jake turned from the window. "And he wants to talk to Lisa. Says he reacted too quickly. That's her decision to make." As if on cue, Lisa appeared in the doorway, carrying a folder of research materials. She had accepted his offer to stay temporarily in the city, a chance to reset and start fresh. "I talked to Ben," she said directly. He apologized. "Asked if we could start over." Jake kept his face neutral. "And what did you say?" A small smile, much like his own, crossed her face. "I told him I needed time. That I'm still figuring out who I really am under all the lies." Jake nodded, feeling something unfamiliar. "Pride, maybe. Or hope." "David called from jail," Lisa continued, her expression hardening. "Begged for my help for me to testify for him." Her voice got cold. "I told him he was nothing to me anymore." Something cold and satisfied spread in Jake's chest. Not just revenge, but vindication. Truth finally rising after 15 years buried under lies. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. Jake looked at his daughter, really seeing her, recognizing parts of himself, the strength under the hurt, the smarts behind the caution, the determination in her eyes. "Now," he replied, "we build something real." As Lisa left to review some project plans, Kevin stayed behind, thoughtful. 15 years is a long time to wait for revenge, he finally said. Jake looked back at the city outside. It wasn't just revenge. It was justice. The world finally sees David and Sarah for what they really are. And forgiveness? Kevin asked quietly. Jake's reflection in the glass showed no emotion, just the hard features of a man who had turned pain into power. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, he said simply. Only settled. In the months that followed, Wilson Construction's properties would be sold off, their projects taken over by Miller Investments. The Wilson name would disappear from buildings across the region, replaced by the Miller logo. David and Sarah would serve their time in prison, their social status gone, their friends scattered to more promising connections. And Jake would continue building his business empire, now with his daughter by his side. He had lost 15 years with her, but he wouldn't lose another day. She was learning the business quickly, showing a natural talent for design that surprised and pleased him. One evening, as they looked over plans for a new development, one that would be built where the Wilson house once stood, which Jake had bought at a government auction, Lisa asked the question he had been waiting for. Was it worth it? All those years of planning, waiting. Jake thought of David's face as police led him away in handcuffs. Sarah's tearful pleas for mercy that no one listened to. The Wilson empire was torn down piece by piece. Yes, he said simply. Some debts can only be paid in full. Outside his office windows, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the city in a clean, white blanket. But Jake Miller, a man who neither forgot nor forgave, knew that under every clean surface lay the hard truth of the past. And he had learned through years of patient planning how to use that truth like a weapon, striking only when victory was completely certain. That was the price of betrayal. And he had collected it in full.